Right. Welcome in everybody to week 4's AMA start sit whatever stream, whatever we call this. But this is the fifth actual week of us doing this, but week 4 of the NFL season. So we're here to answer any and all questions, whether that start sits, it's trades, it's dynasty, it's whatever it is. Drop it down in the comments and we will get through as many questions as we can over the next hour or so. But joined as always by the great John Paulsen. John, how are you doing on this fine day?
I'm doing all right. It was a rough game last night watching my Packers kind of poop the bed in the first half, made things sort of competitive for a second in the second half. But Lions right now, clearly the better football team. And, unlike the Bears and Vikings, who I have over the years learned to despise the teams specifically and some of the fans. The Lions are just kind of like, I'm kind of root for them. If the Packers can't win the NFC North, then I'd like to see the Lions do it. So, no ill will. Best of luck to you. We'll see you, I think, Thanksgiving for the Packers at Lions, I believe.
Rematch. We'll see if Jordan Love can get a little bit better, I think, between now and then. We'll have to see. But
that offensive line needs to get healthier. They really struggled. So I think the offensive line sometimes can button up mediocre pass rushes, but the Lions have a good pass rush, and Packers definitely struggled.
Yep, and we kind of saw that last week too against the Saints a little bit as well. Yeah. It was just a little. You can't play the Bears every single week. But we do. I mean, we can just kind of briefly discuss what happened last night because we do have Yam Baggy in here is asking, when can I feel warm and fuzzy about drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, both in Dynasty and in redraft? Obviously, Dynasty was a top 4 pick in rookie drafts and Superflex leagues. He's widely considered a top 5, if not top 3 Dynasty running back. Redraft, he was a late 3rd, early 4th round pick. What is the where's the panic meter for you set at for Jahmyr Gibbs for the rest of the season? Are you worried about the usage? Is this just because it was his 4th game of his career? David Montgomery still looks pretty good. What's the panic meter for you?
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, but on draft night when they took him, I think it was the 12th overall pick, it was a surprise given the presence of DeAndre Swift, a similar type player. Jamal Williams. I don't remember if they moved on from Jamal Williams before the draft.
I think
or
they
after.
had. He had already signed with the Saints, and they had already signed David Montgomery, but they still had Swift on the roster.
Right. So you're thinking heading into the draft that it's going to be Montgomery in the Jamal Williams role, Swift in his role. Pretty easy to predict. And then they went out and drafted Gibbs with such high draft capital. The Lions aren't in a position, I don't think, to use a top 15 early first round pick on a running back. They have other holes they could have filled and just kept Swift on the roster, but they saw something in Gibbs. And I think that signaled to those of us trying to read the tea leaves that they were going to use him more than they used Swift. They were basically done with Swift. They traded him away to the Eagles. And I think we thought that he'd have a Swift plus role, at least, maybe not a 20 touch person, but, more of a 15 to 18 touches a game type player, with Montgomery in a complementary role, more of an even split as opposed to what we saw with Swift and Williams. So it just doesn't make draft capital sense for them to use that capital on Gibbs and then not use him, but that's what they're doing. They got the 32 carries to David Montgomery. He obviously had a huge week 1 against the Chiefs. Gibbs 8 carries for 40 yards, 4 catches for 11. They're using him as a receiver, but not, in any inventive, creative ways that are getting him lots of yardage. I think he's good. I think he's really good, but when can you feel better about it? I think redraft, it's going to be a little dicey rest of season. I mean, they might ramp up his touches some if there's any sort. I mean, I don't think Montgomery is going to be able to handle 32 carries a game and stay healthy. We've already seen him get banged up and miss a couple games. So he might not stay healthy, but if Montgomery is healthy, I think you might see him pretty likely in a lead back role like this, where he's seeing 18 to 20 touches on average per game. Gibbs in the 10 to 12 touch they were very fortunate last night to be able to run the ball 43 times. You're not going to be able to do that every week. Obviously, the game script favored him. So, Dynasty, I think, you're probably hoping for more usage as a rookie. For the next short term here, they've got Montgomery in the fold now, so we might see this moving forward for the next 2 to 3 years. I'm hoping it's not this stark of a split, but Dan Campbell likes these kind of banger running backs that are getting those extra yards and are able to be really physical at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, that was one thing that I think I noted from last night and everybody's reaction about why aren't they using Gibbs more. And I'm like, I mean, the Lions were up by 2 scores for like 80% of that game, 2 or more. Like just immediately they came out. Amon-Ra the touchdown, and then Montgomery had his first touchdown. It was like 14-0, like boom, first quarter. And so why would you use Jahmyr Gibbs in like that grinder run out the clock kind of role? That is what David Montgomery is there to do. And then whenever they get down into the goal line, that's David Montgomery's area. Like, I feel like we knew that. Like, we knew coming into the season that Montgomery was going to get a lot of goal line work, that Jahmyr Gibbs isn't really fit for that kind of stuff. He didn't do it at Alabama. He is the grinder role. Jahmyr Gibbs is the more explosive guy. To me, I think it's weird to point at last night's game and be worried that they aren't using Jahmyr Gibbs, because last night's game was, I think, not necessarily an outlier, but it was just, they were in a run heavy game script the entire game. And so I'm not necessarily worried about it. I mean, you can look at other running backs. I tweeted about it last night, but like Alvin Kamara for the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of his rookie season was playing behind Adrian Peterson and Mark Ingram. And Mark Ingram that season had 1,100 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara is Alvin Kamara. Christian McCaffrey, you look at the first 4 games of his career, only 31 rush attempts, 29 targets. Then Christian McCaffrey became Christian McCaffrey because he was playing alongside, I think it was Jonathan Stewart still, maybe, or somebody else. And Cam Newton was a massive runner. And then you even look at DeAndre Swift's usage. Like DeAndre Swift's rookie year usage, they had a bye in week 5, but from weeks 1 through 4, DeAndre Swift only had 16 targets and 12 rush attempts through the first 4 weeks of the season. Then after the bye, he came out and he was way more heavily involved, at least in terms of rushing and even honestly in the receiving game, where he averaged 15 opportunities a game after the bye. Now he did get injured in there, but again, he was also playing with Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson again. So to me, I'm not necessarily concerned about Jahmyr Gibbs. I think we're just going to have to pick and choose the matchups based on if they're heavily favored or if we expect a game to be more dominant from the Lions. Thus, they're just going to run the ball and just grind and pound. We got there. And if it's more of a neutral game script or a negative game script for them, then that's Jahmyr Gibbs in more of a passing role and maybe a little bit more volume on the ground.
Let me ask you this, though. Coming out of the draft, would you have expected him to have 21 touches in his first 2 games with David Montgomery also healthy, like just 21 touches, or were you expecting more like 25 to 30?
Yeah, I probably would have expected a little bit more, but I mean, at the end, like, he's still a rookie. Like, Bijan's even still getting worked in as a rookie. Like, I feel like this is something that I'm starting to learn this year is like, we can't expect a whole lot from rookies early on in the year, like early on in their rookie season, right?
Well, if there's another veteran presence, I mean, Algier and David Montgomery give the Lions and the Falcons options that they don't have to put. I mean, we see rookie running backs come in and do well and get work all the time, but it usually depends on how much better are they than the next guy in the backfield. And in those 2 cases, you have another veteran who's pretty good.
Yeah, I just think we always talk about how for rookie wide receivers is always, let's see what happens after the bye week. They always have this second half of the season like, massive growth. I feel like we, at a certain point, we kind of need to adjust to running backs to start doing that same sort of thing, especially as the NFL evolves a little bit too. And we're not seeing as many, just straight up workhorses anymore. Like, I feel like Najee, is kind of going to be an outlier over the next couple of years. And the fact that he just was drafted in the first round, came in, there was nobody else, and he got 80% of the workload. I feel like that is going to be more of an anomaly moving forward than what we're seeing right now currently.
So one thing that while you were talking, I wondered, about you mentioned all those players that kind of came in and had a slow start as rookies. I just wonder if this is a feature of Dan Campbell and was it the offensive coordinator blanking on his name, Ben Johnson or something
Ben
like that.
Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wonder if this is more of a feature than a bug, where they're always going to have a complimentary, bigger veteran back like a Montgomery, like a Jamal Williams, because they're cheap, typically affordable anyway, and are able to really absorb a lot of those touches. And maybe this is something that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have to deal with for some time, because it doesn't seem like they devalue the running back position like a lot of teams do.
Right. Yeah. I do think that that's going to be more of the adjustment, especially for Dynasty, is that Gibbs owners are going to have to deal with this for probably the entire time that he's in Detroit, especially because Monty signed a 3-year deal, which is maybe it's more of a 2-year deal, but then we're talking about all this again next year. But it was just a very long conversation about Jahmyr Gibbs. We got to get into some of these questions here. Here for the memes. Back with us again. Hit us with another $5 super chat. So here for the memes. Thank you so much for your continued weekly support here. Let's see what we got. We got a Dynasty PPR start 3 wide receiver Superflex league. He traded away Kyler for a 24 first, a 24 second, and a 25 first. And then he traded 2 firsts and 3 seconds for Amon-Ra and Brock Purdy, pairing Brock with Amar and St. Brown with AJ Brown. So I actually don't mind the Kyler trade, getting 2 firsts and a second for him. I feel like that's very good value given how the Dynasty community has been treating Kyler for the past year almost, it seems, ever since the injury. So a little less than a year, but I feel like that's very good value right now. And then trading away 2 firsts and a few seconds for Amon-Ra and Purdy. Like, I feel like Purdy is worth the first to me. So then you're saying that you got Amon-Ra for a first and a couple seconds. I mean, I think both these trades are fantastic value. You've nicely moved around some of your assets to give you Lamar, Brock Purdy, Amon-Ra, and AJ. I like it.
I'm glad you fielded that question, because I'm still trying to understand the 24. I think I got 2 firsts and 3 seconds for Amon-Ra and Purdy. So
Right.
Kyler, gotcha. So you're basically trading Kyler and a couple of seconds for Amon-Ra and Purdy, if I'm reading that correctly. Because the 2 firsts offset. And then
essentially, yeah, you can read that. Yeah, essentially Kyler and a couple seconds for Amon-Ra and Brock Purdy. Yeah, that's a lot cleaner way to read it than what I was trying to go through individually. But yeah,
I have to make it simple for me when it comes to Dynasty.
When you put it that way, I think that's pretty solid. I mean, of course, you probably lost a little bit going from a 24 first to a 25 first, because you gave it 2 24s, but a first is a first whenever you get to that actual season. So that'll kind of cancel out. And yeah, I think that's fantastic value. It's a great job here for the memes.
What are your long-term prospects on Kyler?
I still believe that he's going to be a top 12 quarterback moving forward, regardless of what team he ends up getting traded to, or if he stays in Arizona. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he stayed in Arizona, but I think that if he's going to get traded somewhere, he's going to go somewhere great and just be as good as he was, maybe even better than what he was in Arizona, because maybe he'll have an offensive coordinator who actually utilizes him, I think, well.
The coaching staff seems better now in Arizona than it was.
Right.
So maybe, staying. I usually like to see a change of scenery when it kind of goes this direction, but he might be able to succeed in Arizona still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do believe that. But I've also been envisioning Kyler in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson. So it's been daydreams of mine. Cold Fusion is in the chat. He says, yo, and then it has a question. 14-team PPR Dynasty League. We're just going to hit all the Dynasty questions off the rip, I guess. Have a good set of wide receivers, Tyreek, Diggs, Keenan Allen, but I'm looking to add some depth. What do you think of Amari Cooper or Michael Pittman? What are they worth in draft picks? So I would take either one of them. I think is fine. I'd take Pittman over Amari, but if you can get Cooper at a not significantly cheaper, but at a cheaper price than Michael Pittman, then I would do that. Like if you had to pay a first for Pittman or a couple seconds for Amari, I'd rather pay a couple seconds for Amari. And that's essentially kind of how I would value both of them as well. If you can get Pittman for less than a first, though, I think that'd be fantastic. Or if you have some other kind of bench player at another position that you can then pair with a second or a couple seconds and go get Michael Pittman, then I would love that because his production has been, I think, really just I don't think people realize how good Michael Pittman has been this year to start the year with both Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew. Richardson has so far shown that he's at least a much better passer than I think we gave him credit for coming out of college. So if that continues, then that'll do well.
Yeah, Pittman's 25, Cooper's 29. You're getting the 4 years, and Pittman's been really surprisingly great in what we thought might be a really run-heavy offense, but they've actually passed in the game and a quarter that Richardson played. They passed at a 60, 61% rate, which is pretty surprising. And then Pittman's one of those Matt Harmon guys that charts really, really well in the route running. So I always like to target those guys when I can.
Baker Kids asking full PPR and a start 9. Who do you like more rest of season, Brandon Ayuk or Chris Godwin? And it's Ayuk for me.
Yeah, it is for me too. I think they're similar talents, but you can see what's going on in Tampa. We've got a 3-game sample so far. It's Mike Evans or bust for Baker Mayfield. Godwin's kind of a complimentary piece. Ayuk, is probably going to be breaking out again. I mean, he had a good season last year. But we know he's really talented as well. And now Debo's dinged up. So it's Ayuk for me as well.
And then he's also asking if he should hold or sell Judy on a 1 quarterback start 10 PPR on a rebuilding team. Basically, my answer for this would be if you can sell Judy for a 24 first now, I would do it. If you're not getting offers like that, then I would hold him. It's essentially how I would view that. Are you in on Judy rest of season?
I've been fading Judy all year. I don't have him on any teams. You could see the path for him to do well, but the injury in August or whatever it was set him back, and then you just don't know. I mean, if you have a healthy Sutton, you have Marvin Mims in there, you have a new quarterback or new head coach, offensive coordinator. I didn't see him carrying over what he did last year.
Yeah, and it's kind of like how many years are we going to continue to give him next year is going to be a better year. We're already 4 years into his career.
Other thing I would mention is that he's one of these guys that has a reputation for being a great route runner, but not to mention Matt Harmon 40 times in the podcast, but he's just not up there with the elite ones. And those are the ones that can repeat year after year, get open and repeat their numbers.
Chris is asking, he's been getting absolutely horrible offers for London and Pitts. He's not shopping them, and he knows that they are more talented than their output has been. But do you disagree with him in terms of holding them? This is from probably more of a dynasty aspect, I believe, but I think it also can apply to redraft as well. I'm definitely holding on to both of them. I think in dynasty you have to. And this was kind of going to be the rocky road that I think, hopefully kind of knew that you were signing up for when you acquired both of them, especially after the drafting of Bijan Robinson, that just further solidified what this team's identity wanted to be. I'm hoping that Desmond Ridder gets replaced here eventually. Taylor Heineke might be a better quarterback than Ridder is for fantasy for the prospects of both of these guys. But I think you're holding on to both of these guys for dynasty. Now for redraft, John, are you keeping both these guys on your roster? Are you dropping either one of these guys? I've seen people say drop Kyle Pitts, and that's going to be a tough pill to swallow, I think.
Pitts is, I think, due to the nature of redraft, it also depends on the size of bench. You don't usually want to carry more than one tight end, but I don't mind doing it when it's a player with upside. And I certainly think Pitts has upside. He's leading the league or his position in air yards, which, with Desmond Ridder at quarterback, it's more like prayer yards. Ridder is the 33rd graded passer at PFF out of 34. Bryce Young is 34th, by the way. the targets are just not catchable at a high rate. I think Pitts's catchable target rate's like 54% or something. I saw a tweet. It's bad. So you're just hoping, I think, as a London and Pitts manager, that they make a change at quarterback. I don't know if they will, because I think we're just going to be up, in for this up and down type season if Ritter remains, because they are run heavy. They tend to only feature one of the two any week, and we don't know which one it's going to be. So they're just holds for me, and hoping that Taylor Heineke, gets the call, and this can turn into some kind of normal passing game where, there's a mediocre quarterback that can deliver a decent ball.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm gonna run through a couple quick Dynasty questions that are relatively quick and easy to answer. And then we'll get to the fun start sits, John. So let me just run through like 3 or 4 of these just to answer these questions. Greg's asking, should he trade Kyron and Brandon Ayuk for AJ Brown in Dynasty? I absolutely would, even in a 16-team league. MV's asking, what is a good deal for Puka? What is a good return for him? Also in Dynasty, I would take a 24 first. I've been saying that for a couple weeks now, that I would just cash out for a first. I've seen people get more than a first. I actually saw somebody get 2 firsts for Puka a couple weeks ago, which was insane. I would be willing to just take 1, but that kind of gives you a starting framework for how a deal should work out. Ron, should you trade away Bryce Young and Roschon Johnson to acquire Kyler and Zach Charbonnet? I would do that. I would take Kyler and Zach Charbonnet. And then where was the other one? The Tua trade. Where is it? 1 early first and 1 mid first for Tua in Superflex. I would take Tua unless that early first has a good chance to be either Marvin Harrison or Caleb Williams. Like, if you're, by you saying that it's early, it's going to be more 103, 104, maybe even 105, probably not necessarily 105. But if we're talking like Drake May or the wide receiver 2, or if Quinn Ewers works his way up in there, I would just take Tua then for both of those first. But if that early first looks like it has a decent chance to be Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison, then I would take the picks. And we'll go one more. Trade a first and Hunt for Jonathan Taylor. I will take Jonathan Taylor in that. Boom. All right. Start sit time, John. You ready?
Yeah.
In a PPR league, pick 2, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Raheem Mostert, or DeAndre Swift. We're just going to start out with a banger of a question here.
This is full PPR.
Full PPR. Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Raheem Mostert, or DeAndre Swift. Do you ride the coattails of the Mostert boom game? James Cook is good in PPR. Josh Jacobs has been a little bit slow. DeAndre Swift has looked really good the past 2 weeks, even with Kenneth Gainwell back last week.
I've got Jacobs at 6, Mostert at 8, James Cook at 10, and then Swift at 15. So you have like 4 really good options here. Jacobs does worry me. He just has been he's getting like good volume and stuff, but 19 for 48 in the first game, 17 for 62 last week. He had 9 carries for -2 yards against Buffalo. I think Buffalo's giving up like 5.7 yards per carry, 5.6 yards per carry to running backs, but he had a terrible game against them. He is involved as a receiver, but I'm just kind of worried about this Vegas offense in general and the offensive line. I might move him down.
Is Jimmy G playing?
He is. He's in the concussion protocol. I don't have him in the rankings. Usually when a player gets concussed, they miss the following week at least. I would say 9 times out of 10 or 19 times out of 20. So I just leave him out unless there's buzz on Saturday that they're going to clear and be ready to go. He did, I think, participate in something yesterday, and there was some hope that they were going to be able to clear him. But I've heard that before, and it's just it's a race to get through the protocol by Sunday. So that would also worry me. I mean, obviously the passing game is important to get the running backs into position to score. So I'm leaning, moving Jacobs down a little bit. Mostert on fire. James Cook doing really well. That should be a shootout. I think I would probably go with those two. I can understand Swift too, but he doesn't catch many passes in that Philly offense. They don't feature the running backs much as pass catchers. So that's my one concern with him.
Sure. But they do play Washington, and that game could get out of hand really quickly, and it could be another 25 carries for 170 yards kind of situation. You may not need the receiving volume in a positive game script like that. I went to Mostert and DeAndre Swift because I am worried about Jimmy G not playing, and that game also just kind of being out of Vegas's reach, and they're going to have to throw a little bit more. And if Jimmy G is playing, he is hyper consolidated his target share down to Adams and Myers, and then Jacobs is just kind of getting some of the scraps of what's left. I think I'm doing Mostert and Swift, but you're doing Cook and Mostert in the Bills Dolphins shootout.
Yeah, and I think if you feel, I mean, it's not the projections aren't. It's a point difference. So if you want to start DeAndre Swift because he's the hotter player than Cook, he does have probably a better chance to score a touchdown. But I love this matchup with James Cook against Miami. They're 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, and he's been seeing really good volume in that Buffalo offense.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Miami was. I made a note of that after week 1. I said when I watched Eckler and Joshua Kelly torch Miami, I was like, play running backs against Miami. That works. So Wowzers, hopefully Mostert seems like it's a lock for both of us. So I think your decision is more Cook or Swift, and I don't think you really necessarily have a bad decision. John's more right than I am, so I'd probably pick Cook.
Yeah, I just the good thing about this question is that I decided I'm going to move Jacobs down. So I don't think I would start him over Mostert or Cook.
In another PPR league, Michelle is asking a start sit between Tutu, Tank Dell, Zach Moss, Alvin Kamara, or Kyron Williams. She needs major upside from this. So I'm assuming we just need to pick one of these guys, whoever has a ton of upside or at least has the best chance of hitting a good ceiling. Last night was brutal for her. She said maybe she played against Monty, or maybe I'm trying to think. Maybe she had Gibbs and now needs some upside. So in a PPR league, I would like to say that the wide receivers have the most upside. I think Zach Moss is all right. I don't know if I trust Kamara off the suspension in week 1. Kyron Williams, though, is really, really interesting. The fact that they play Indy, but Tank Dell has been hot.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one because PPR, you start to favor receivers, but these 3 running backs are very likely to see heavy touches. Probably Kyron and Moss more so than Kamara first game back, but you could also see
they
Kamara
play Tampa.
Yeah, you could also see Kamara with a big workload this week because he's not coming off of injury; he's coming off suspension. But the rankings, the projections say Kyron first, then Moss, then Kamara, and then you get into the receivers. I think it's just easier. There's the floor with running backs. It's easier to get them the ball. And I think with Moss and Kyron, you do have upside because you have multi-touchdown upside with both players. I feel a little bit better about Kyron because Matthew Stafford's not going to be sneaking in 2 touchdowns. But as Daigle said on the pod, Anthony Richardson might be limited around the goal line coming off the concussion. They might not run him until he could prove he could slide, not put his head down at the goal line. So it might be Moss, sort of taking those touches this week.
I think Kyron is probably the best answer. He's seen like 100% of the running back touches in every single week, especially since Akers was traded. And like you said, even if Richardson doesn't take as much running, he's still going to take more than what Stafford would and more than Ronnie Rivers or Royce Freeman or whoever the heck is still on the team behind Kyron. So I think Kyron is the answer here in terms of safety and ceiling.
And I think with the receivers, if there is upside there because Tank he did catch a long one. I don't know if Tutu's really working downfield a whole lot, but Dell did have the huge game and is a threat deep. So if you're looking for like a 7 for 150 and 2 touchdown day, that is possible from him. I just think you're really lowering your floor with any receiver because he could easily go for 3 for 30 with Nico Collins having a big game.
Sure. Kyrus is asking, still in a PPR league, so we're sticking with the same rankings here. He needs 2 guys out of DeAndre Swift, T. Higgins, Deebo Samuel, and Kyron Williams. So we've already kind of hit on Swift and Williams a little bit. We now add the 2 wide receivers of T. Higgins and Deebo Samuel. T. Higgins has had 2 dud weeks and 1 boom week. Deebo, a little banged up, as we mentioned a little bit before. And they also get Arizona. So I could just see Christian McCaffrey having 250 yards, and the Niners don't really need to do much. So I think because of that, I still stick with Kyron Williams, and I stick with DeAndre Swift as well over the wide receivers.
You have this Kyrus has a good problem here. These are 4 of the top 39 players in the flex this week, so it's a good issue to have, good depth to have. Kyron, I think for sure. And then for me, the choice is between Deebo and Swift. Deebo being dinged up might have him slide down the projections a bit. Addison, you bring up a good point about this game. Like, I took, I might have cursed them, but I took the 49ers in the survivor pool for the Super Bowl tickets, the BetSperts pool. So I'm hoping, both times I picked against the Arizona Cardinals, it was dicey with Washington. And then the Giants the following week. So I went away from them last week, and they won against Dallas. And now I'm back to it because it's in San Francisco. I think that the 49ers are really talented, one of the best teams in the league.
Yep.
And they should have control of this game from the outset, and they could just kind of shut Deebo down if he plays at all. So I am a little worried about his snap share in this game because he's pretty dinged up. I wasn't practicing as of yesterday, so I haven't seen what he did today. But so I probably would lean Swift over him at this point, but kind of keep an eye on the rankings.
There we go. Brock is in a full PPR. Would you trade away Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, and Khalil Herbert for Travis Etienne and Brandon Ayuk? I'm just going to assume that this is a redraft league. And well, to be honest, I don't know if it really necessarily matters if it's redraft or not. I think I'm taking Etienne and Ayuk, regardless of the format. Kupp's enticing though, but the wording around Cooper Kupp still from like McVay and the team just does not inspire confidence in me that he's returning anytime soon.
Wasn't it hopeful that they were returning? He's returning week 5. I saw something.
Yeah, hopeful is hopeful.
You don't want to see hopeful. You want to see we were expecting him to return. It says Cooper Kupp might not be ready to go week 5 when he returns.
Yeah,
McVay maintaining hope he's available.
Hope.
And I'm not sure when their bye is.
Doesn't inspire confidence in me, John. To be honest, I've kind of been expecting that Cooper Kupp wouldn't be back until November. Their bye week's in week 10, which is
10, yeah.
November 12th. So
I would take Etienne and Ayuk then. And DJ Moore doesn't he's a good player, but it's not going great with Chicago. They're kind of circling the toilet. Maybe things get things going, but their first 3 games have not inspired much confidence. Khalil Herbert, I think, is a good runner, but he's got a good runner behind him. Rashawn Johnson as well, who's probably better in the passing game and a better pass blocker. Herbert's improved in that area, but they're basically splitting time. So to get a bona fide, I think I have an ETN in my top 5 this week. I think Ayuk is an excellent player, so I think I would go that route as well.
Yep, I would take Ayuk over DJ Moore and Khalil Herbert if you kind of want to break it down that way, and then I would just get ETN now and not mess around with the Cooper Kupp stuff.
If we knew Kupp was ready to go week 5, that would change things.
I would take Kupp,
especially redraft. You're not expecting multiple years out of him, but I think given that wording, the tea leaves, reading those tea leaves, man, it doesn't sound great for Kupp short term.
Yep. So might as well. And by the time Cooper Kupp returns, you might not be in a position to really make the playoffs or do anything. You want to get to that point, and then maybe you can make a move for Cooper Kupp later on down in the year. But you need to get there.
DJ Moore, the name recognition, it's but if you actually have him, you're not sure you want to start him every week. It takes a good matchup.
Touchdown saved him last week.
Yeah. So
Albert says, hello, fellas. Thanks for taking the time for this. Need some starting guidance. He needs to start one of these two, Achane or Javonte Williams at running back. And the one of these two, and then so Achane or Javonte Williams. We'll just attack that one.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Matt Waldman. I retweeted a Matt Waldman breakdown of how Miami is creating such running lanes against Denver last week. So he did a really nice job with that. I just wanted to give him a shout out.
I don't think it's hard to create running lanes against Denver, though.
Right. But I mean, the theory behind it was pretty interesting. And that's why Mike McDaniel likes running backs with so much speed, is they're able to create these problems on the perimeter. And then once you create problems on the perimeter, you're able to fake that you're going to go perimeter and run up the middle. And it just is causing all sorts of havoc because these Achane and Mostert are just faster than any of these linebackers that are on the field. So based off of that, my thinking on Achane is, because he, we view him as the RB2 right now, but he was actually first half leading carries. Mostert was getting the catches, and then Mostert came back with some rushes. And I think, heading into the season, we were thinking that Achane would be the pass catcher and Mostert would be the primary runner. But against Denver, they flipped the script. So I don't think that they're going to put the genie in the back in the bottle against the Bills. I think they're going to try to do the same things that work so well against Denver. They're probably not going to work quite as well, but the Bills' rush defense is not their strong suit either. 5.6 yards per carry allowed to running backs. And if the Dolphins want to run the ball, I think they'll be able to. So long story short, Javonte also has a nice matchup this week
against Chicago.
So this is a tough one. I might go with the guy that scored 50 last week.
I think that's where I lean, because we're still there's still issues with Javonte that he's still working his way back from the ACL injury. He's still the offense just in general is not very good. I think I'm trying to catch lightning in a bottle again with Achane. And
it's a little point chasey, but I think it's okay when the guy scored 50. And then Javonte, I think, maybe gives you a touch floor that's higher than Achane's. So, I think you're going to get 15, 17 touches from him against Chicago, which should be enough for him to do well. But Achane just has like multi-touchdown upside. And I like last week's usage relative to Mostert indicates that they want to get him significantly more involved. The one caveat is that Jalen Waddle is out, but I don't know how much Jalen Waddle's absence affected Achane usage. Right. It might be some, because they were like, okay, we only have one receiver, and we're going to really stress the running game. And now they had Waddle back. That might shift things a little bit more to the pass. But as I said, the Bills are vulnerable against the run.
Right. Like you said, if they want to run, they'll probably be able to run. So I would go back to Devon Achane and go for him. He has a much higher ceiling as well too. Seth hit us with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Seth. He said that he sent away DJ Moore in a 2026 second for Jackson Smith and Jigba and a 1 quarterback half-point PPR dynasty keeper. Do you win or lose that trade? And then he also traded away, I'm assuming that's Christian Watson and Luke Musgrave for Drake London and a third. If it's Deshaun Watson, then that's an easy London. But if that's Christian Watson, that's a different story. And I think that's where we're at. But as far as the first trade, DJ Moore in a second for Jackson Smith and Jigba in the Dynasty League, I think that's fantastic. We were just talking about how if you have DJ Moore, name value is great, but you're probably not too happy throwing him in your lineup every single week. It doesn't inspire a ton of weekly confidence. So I love that, just to go get JSN, who's a much better player and prospect right now on a potentially better team. And then Christian Watson and Luke Musgrave for Drake London. I would probably take Christian Watson and Musgrave. I would take Watson and London, I feel like, are already pretty similar. I would take London over Watson, but I would take Musgrave very easily over a 24 third. So I think just the combo of those two, I'd rather have than London in a third. I don't know if you read either one of those two differently, John.
I agree. Jackson Smith and Jigba has gotten off to a slow start, and it's not entirely shocking given the talent ahead of him with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Geno Smith. rapport with those guys, experience with those guys, it's not shocking that he has not. There just weren't a lot of targets available for him to come into unless they force fed him targets. And we saw some video of Geno kind of pumping up JSN. JSN doesn't look particularly happy with his role, but long term, Lockett is getting older. If he moves on, you all of a sudden have JSN in a much bigger role in Seattle, and it should go well for him. And I agree, if that's Christian Watson, I want that side because, as you mentioned, Watson and London are pretty close. Musgrave is a very nice prospect. He got concussed last night, but that's why he wasn't doing much. He missed part of the game, but he's been very.
Guara went off.
But Musgrave looks really fast and athletic, and I think he's along with Laporta, looking like the next great talent at that position, and they like to use him. He won that job right away in camp, so I think he's going to be entrenched there for years.
I agree. So, Seth, I think you're 1 for 2. But the one that you hit on was really, really good. And I don't mind Drake London. I don't mind getting that side of the deal. But the Watson and Musgrave side, I think it's just a little bit nicer. But the JSN trade, absolutely fantastic.
The other thing with London and Watson is interesting because the quarterback situations. I think I do feel better about Love than we do about the quarterback situation in Atlanta long term. I mean, they might get somebody better. They're a decent team, though. How good of a quarterback are they going to be able to get in the draft? They have to hit on maybe a middle round pick. As opposed to getting a Caleb or something. So, I feel pretty good.
For Tyler.
Or they trade for Tyler. But I mean, Love's propensity for high ADOT passes really meshes well with Watson, Christian Watson. So I think those two are going to be a nice duo for years. Yeah, I feel better about that. The Packer side, but I'm a Packer backer, so
I think this is an interesting question. Andrew's asking, can you rank these 3 rookie wide receivers, JSN, Quentin Johnston, Marvin Mims, for potential PPR dart throws? I'm assuming maybe for this week, but we can also maybe include rest of season as well in this because I think it's just interesting. But he said this week specifically, he's probably a decent underdog. So upside is preferably preferred. Probably preferred. So yeah, JSN, Quentin Johnston, Marvin Mims, all 3 of these guys have talent in and of themselves. Quentin Johnston obviously is the hot name after the Mike Williams ACL injury. Mims looked fantastic. I think he's averaging somewhere close to 30 yards per route run or something like that. Yeah. And then we just talked about Jackson Smith and Jigba as well. So we can just attack both of these individually. If you just want to go, who do you prefer more as a dart throw this week? And then maybe rest of season, if that answer is different.
I think, looking at my rankings too, this is an interesting situation with the Chargers because I prefer Palmer short term because Johnson just hasn't done anything yet. Also, reports out of camp were not great, but we've seen that before with rookie receivers kind of struggling early on and then coming on late in the season. So I do think that by the end of the season, he could be something. He could be a fantasy starter. I think Palmer in the short term is a better bet given what he's done when Keenan Allen and or Mike Williams have missed. And he's been a solid 12, 14 point guy. I think dart throw Marvin Mims. I mean, he's actually the guy who has done it. It's only 3 games into his rookie season. He's incredibly efficient. And you have to think that Sean Payton is not a dummy and they start to ramp up his routes to get him on the field more. And he does have a nice rapport so far with Russell Wilson. So I think from a dart, week 4 dart throw, I would rather go with Mims against Chicago. Quentin Johnson could deliver against Vegas. I mean, Vegas is a bad defense as well. And I wouldn't right now. I would have JSN just third amongst those 2, just due to the guys that are ahead of him.
Right. I think that's exactly how I view it as well too. I think Mims is the better play this week. Quentin Johnston is the best play of the 3, I think, out of the entire season in terms of if you're looking for the most upside, his ability in the Chargers offense. And I just looked it up too. Their bye week is actually next week, the Chargers. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go into this Vegas game and they just say, you know what, Josh Palmer knows the offense. He's going to be the guy for this week. And then after the bye week, and we kind of talked about this earlier, is that we see these rookies take a big step forward after their team's bye weeks. So we could see that they start integrating Quentin Johnston in a little bit more each and every week after next week, to where
I would take Mims over Quentin Johnson rest of season.
okay.
I do think Quentin Johnson will come up. I think both players will start to emerge second half. I like what we've seen from Mims so far. As you mentioned,
Sure.
he is leading the league in yards per route run, 7.22. So
That's wrong. I think it's 40
ungodly.
or 50. Mims. So the Broncos bye week, I looked that up. Is the Broncos bye week is week 9. So a couple more weeks to go for them in terms of if you're buying into the post bye week breakout. But right after that, they get Buffalo and then Minnesota and then Cleveland, then Houston, and then the Chargers. So it's a pretty
up
juicy
and down matchups. Yeah,
there's some juicy matchups there for sure for Mims right after the bye. On top of the fact that he gets Kansas City twice over the next 5 weeks after Chicago this week. So, there's certainly upside with both of them. But Mims this week, if that's what you're looking for. Zach's asking if he trades Ridley in the late first for T. Higgins in a 12-team dynasty. I would take T. Higgins in this. I think this is a pretty solid buy low for Higgins, but I also like it from the other side as well. So if you're competing, I'd probably hold on to Ridley in the first. If you are rebuilding, though, I would take T. Higgins, which might sound counterintuitive to trade away the first, but I would still take T.
Ridley 28, Higgins 24. So
buy back some years.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question of how far would Chuba Hubbard move up in the projections if Miles Sanders is either out or limited this week? Reports are saying that he did not practice today, which is not a good indicator for his availability on Sunday.
I knew he was out yesterday, and I'm searching just to double check that to give you the proper answer. Not suited up Friday. Groin injury. Have they involved any other running backs other than Chuba? And I know they had Blackshear for a while. I don't know if he ever got any carries. And just interested to see.
I don't even know who their QB or their RB3 even is.
Yeah, no other running back. So the reason I asked that is, if they're rotating 2 backs behind Sanders, then it's more likely there'll be a committee if and when Sanders goes down. Right now I'm showing Blackshear as the RB3, but I don't even know. I'm not 100% sure that that's correct, but I'd always have to look that up. Chuba Hubbard and Sanders are the only 2 running backs to touch the ball, 53-21 right now. So he would be a pretty solid, Sanders is at RB 19 right now. I don't think there's a huge drop off in a 1-game sample talent. Like what can Chuba Hubbard do if he's getting bell cow touches? And I think you have to put him in that range there with Ramondre Stevenson, Jerome Ford, maybe below Karma. I might put him right at 19 where I've got Sanders. Just expecting him to have all the touches, but maybe a little bit, lower efficiency, yards per carry, etc.
Right.
I'm worried about this offense.
They do play Minnesota, though.
They do play Minnesota. So I'm also worried about the Vikings defense. So I think there's enough there that you could argue that he's a solid RB2. And we've seen him, another player that we've seen him do it before when he's had that opportunity to be the starter.
Yeah. I think I'd be most comfortable throwing him into my flex, although a lot of people out there who probably need a running back this week. I know one of my redraft leagues, I'm like praying that Justice Hill plays, essentially. That's how bad that we've gotten on some of the teams. But so I would probably prefer him as a flex, and maybe you have better options at flex if you decide to go wide receiver heavy or something like that. But I definitely think, like John said, I think that he would be an okay back end RB2. We kind of played this game a little bit with Chuba last year when it was him and Deonta Foreman, and Foreman ended up being the guy. But if
Foreman's not there, so
I was gonna say there is no Foreman, and Raheem Blackshear is not Deonta Foreman, so Chuba could be pretty solid, and he offers receiving upside as well too. So there's I think Chuba might be a better receiver than Miles Sanders is. He probably is, so he could have that aspect of his game.
I just want to go over what he did late last year. He had week 12, 17 for 65, no catches. Week 13, 14 for 74 and a touchdown with 3 catches. He didn't get the start in either one of those games, so he was just the complimentary back. Then week 16, he got the start, 12 for 125, no catches. Did not start week 17, came back week 18, did not start, but he had 21 carries for 69 yards and 1 target. So he's been a little up or down with his receiving, but this year he has 9 catches in 3 games. So I think you're getting a nice touch floor with him if Sanders is out. I don't see them. And he had multiple starts, 10 starts the previous year. So
yep. And as we're talking about this, I literally got an FLA notification saying that Miles Sanders is questionable, but Bryce Young was a full participant, so he's in. So there we go.
Which actually might be bad. It's bad for the Carolina passing game right now. I mean, Andy Dalton is probably better than Bryce Young right now, but he needs the reps.
Yeah, he needs it, and he just needs wide receivers who can get open. that would be helpful. We got a couple Breece Hall questions in here. Dan was asking DeAndre Swift for Breece Hall. I don't know. I'm assuming that this is a trade question. If this is Dynasty, I'm taking Breece Hall. If it's redraft, though, I think that's a different story. Would you take DeAndre Swift rest of season over Breece Hall in redraft?
Yeah, I would take DeAndre Swift over Breece Hall, sadly. But given what we saw, and I think prior to last week, I might have had a different answer because we just didn't know what kind of split we might see with Kenneth Gainwell. Because if Kenneth Gainwell doesn't get hurt, Swift doesn't go off in week 2, and he probably is not having week 3. Like there might be more of he might be ramping up his workload, but they threw him into that week 2 game because of Gainwell's injury.
Right.
Now Swift is looking a lot better than Gainwell, more explosive. I think looking forward now with what he did against Gainwell or what he did versus Gainwell in terms of touches, feeling pretty good about Swift as a really solid RB2. As for Breece Hall, extremely talented player, but this Jets offense is in the trash can right now with Zach Wilson. So I'd much rather have the guy playing for the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, even if he's not going to get a lot of catches or see a lot of touchdowns. He's a good bet for 15 carries for 90 yards, and maybe he scores a touchdown.
Yep. Swift over Breece Hall for just this season, redraft. Breece Hall over Swift for Dynasty, though. And then Kyle was asking, with Breece Hall full participant in practice, no injury designation, does the leash finally come off this week? Or are we waiting a couple more weeks in here? Looking up their bye week, because I'm curious on that. Week 7. So we got a couple more weeks for their bye week before potentially we see the leash come off after the bye.
I thought that with the Aaron Rodgers injury, they would ramp him up faster because they really need Breece Hall to be what he was like in week 1 for them to win games. He's a great player. He's a lot better than Dalvin Cook right now, but they seem pretty intent on ramping him up slowly. They probably had the conversation, well, this is what we wanted to do with a healthy Rodgers. We shouldn't accelerate his recovery timeline or whatever, give him too much too early just because we lost our quarterback. So I don't know if Breece Hall was limited all these practices. I mean, is this a big change for him? I can look at the injury report that we have on the site. I really hadn't been tracking Breece Hall. I just knew he's been playing.
He was limited
last week,
Wednesday, and limited on Thursday, or full participant Thursday, and I'm assuming full today. So that was this week.
Okay. Yeah, last week. Okay, so last week he was limited, full. So it's the same. There's no big difference here, I guess is what I'm saying. This is the same thing as what happened last week. So I don't think this is an indicator that the leash is going to come off.
Yeah.
Sorry. I have him in Scott Fishbowl, and
me too.
It's not going great. I was one pick away from Tony Pollard.
Oh no.
Yeah, we got sniped.
Don't worry, I took Austin Eckler first. That was good.
But that was because I took I picked the 103 pick because I wanted to guarantee myself a quarterback. Kelsey went first, so I could have been sitting in that 4 spot with Josh Allen probably, or Mahomes. I got Mahomes, and then I could have had Pollard coming back. Well, actually, it was the 3rd round for Pollard. I took Hawkinson in the 2nd.
Oh, man, that
premium.
would be nice.
Yeah.
Hobo Fraggins hit us with a $5 super chat here. He's asking, would you take Javonte Williams for Jerome Ford in Dynasty? And I say absolutely. Jerome Ford is such a short-term asset. I've seen some wild deals for him over the past couple of weeks, especially since, if you look at the fantasy point number for what he did last week against the Titans, it looks phenomenal. We're like, oh, dude, Jerome Ford, we're in. Until you see that he had averaged 1 yard a carry in that game and just happens to pawn 2 touchdowns. That's essentially, and Tennessee Titans defense, it is what it is. They're not going to face the Titans defense every single week, but Jerome Ford, I feel like, is just such a short-term asset for this year. And we don't even know if Kareem Hunt eventually even eats into his workload. So I would take Javonte. He's the long-term starter in Denver. Only going to get better coming off of the knee injury from last year, and year 2 in 2024 is going to be great. So I'm taking Javonte over Jerome Ford. And you might honestly not see that much of a difference in terms of production this year either, making that switch. So, all right. Is this an easy Javonte, John?
This is easy for me as well. For the rest of the season this year, I've got Ford at 26, Javonte at 28, but that's splitting hairs. And then long term, it's obviously Williams is in the better spot. I mean, Nick Chubb is going to come back and be Nick Chubb. So you're hoping for, I guess, a location change or a team change for Ford because he's not going to play over Nick Chubb.
Well, this is only his second year. So he's got
a few years on the he's going to be stuck behind Chubb for a while.
Yep. Or and even if Chubb comes back and he's limited, like Ford, I don't think Ford's going to be all that much relevant after this year. Like you said, RB26 moving forward, that is kind of relevant this year, but not like some crazy RB1 or something. So I would take Javonte for Jerome Ford. Kieran is asking, after having Montgomery go off last night, I'm assuming he started Monty, so he's already coming in with 30 points on his roster coming into Sunday. So he just needs a safe floor play, not going to kill you at RB2. Are you starting Rachaad White or Damian Pierce this week? Rachaad White gets the Saints and Damian Pierce gets the Steelers.
And this is, we don't know if it's full PPR.
That's a good question. Karen, if you're still in here, hopefully you're still in here.
I just assume things are PPR these days, but which
I don't know if it necessarily matters. I think I'm taking White.
It gives White a little bit of an advantage, I think, if it is. I have White slightly ahead of Pierce, 0.8 by 0.8 projection difference. The one caveat here is I think the New Orleans defense is better than the Steelers' rush defense right now. They're 26th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. I think they're getting gashed pretty badly. Pierce gives you a nice touch floor. So does Rachaad White. I do think that Pierce is a better player, but this Houston offensive line is, he says it's standard in the chat. So can you also put in, Karen, when this league was formed? Because I'm always curious about standard leagues and when they were formed, because it's got to be 15 years ago. I would love to know that. I'm just curious. Standard.
2005. There you go.
I'm just going to do a running bet whenever I get a standard question. I still have White favored by 0.1. You like White?
Yeah, I just like the he has such a control in that backfield that I think he's the only running back still who's still seeing. What was the tweet I saw yesterday? It was 100% of the goal line work in the backfield and still 60% or something else or something like that. I forget what the stat was, but it's just he is their backfield essentially.
He has 58 touches so far.
And Pierce has struggled to keep off Boone and Singletary.
Yeah, 47 touches for Pierce. I think Pierce is better, but I do have White ranked slightly ahead, so I guess I would go that route. I think the matchup does favor Pierce, though. So
yeah, The hard part about like Pierce scored a touchdown last week, which you would
Yeah.
think would make for a fantastic fantasy day, but he had like 10 points.
He hasn't like gotten past 30 something yards rushing yet.
uh-uh.
And I was looking at him, and he's just not, this year is not breaking tackles and yards after contact like he had last year. I mean, he was top 5, I think, top 8 in those metrics last year, and this year he has struggled. So, he was able to succeed behind a bad offensive line last year due to that, but this year he's having issues with that first contact. The plus side is that the Steelers have given up 132 yards rushing on average to opposing running backs per game. Jerome Ford went for 106, Chubb went for 64, Christian McCaffrey went for 152. Even Josh Jacobs, who we discussed, going 9 for -2 against Buffalo, came back with 17 for 62, plus 18 yards receiving. So it's just like one of the best matchups out there. So that would be the one thing that might tilt me towards Pierce. But you made a good point about the touch floor for White.
Yeah. I think I just trust that a little bit more. And then I think you're hoping that both these guys fall in the end zone. And I think I just go with Rachaad White. But it is very close. I will agree. Matt hit us with a $2 super chat. He's asking in a half PPR 12-team league, he needs to start 2 of Samuel, Collins, and Achane. Matt, I'm assuming that's Debo. This is not Curtis Samuel for some reason, right? I just wanted to verify that. I'm assuming it's Debo, Nico, and Devon Achane in a half PPR league. So I would. Are we talked about going Achane earlier in the show. So I think I'm going with it's Debo. Okay. Not Curtis Samuel. I think I'm picking Achane and Nico. Because I'm assuming that Debo might just be out, and that might make your decision easy for you. But even if he's in, I don't know if I necessarily trust his full participation in a matchup where they might just stomp Arizona and run with Christian McCaffrey. And Ayuk is back too. Nico and Achane for me.
I've got a Debo at 30, Achane at 39, and then Nico at 60. It's not
60.
It's flex rankings.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're only separated by a point. One, Devon Achane is it Achane or Achane? I thought he changed his last.
Yeah, he did.
I gotta say that, otherwise I'll always forget. I have him projected for 12 and half PPR, Nico for 10.9. So that means a 20 spot drop in the flex rankings. But so for me, it's Achane for sure. Debo versus Nico is a usage question for Debo. Like, is he normal? Getting his normal workload? Is he getting 80% of his workload? I think if he's getting 80%, then I would take him over Nico. Nico had the really good week 2, pretty good week 1. It was very quiet last week.
He hurt last week.
So I think if you're thinking Debo's going to, or the 49ers are going to stomp the Cardinals, then Debo will probably be part of that in the first couple quarters and get there. So I probably would go Debo and Achane. However, I would keep an eye on the news with Debo. If they say he's going to be on a snap count, they say he's very limited or he's very questionable to play, then go ahead and go with Collins.
Debo certainly has a much higher ceiling for sure. So if you need a little bit of that injected in your lineup, he'd be a better start than Nico. All right, John, it's 105. Is it last call?
last call for super chats, I guess. It's been fun though. This is I was thinking that when I was asked to do this super chat start sit, I was gonna dread it, but there's enough Dynasty talk, and the start sits have been kind of interesting. It's not just like, okay, I need you to read your rankings to me type vibe. So there's like some thought behind it. So I'm enjoying it. So if there's any more super chats, I'm happy to stay. If you want to throw a couple more questions out there that are interesting.
Yeah, we got some just some quick like this guy or this guy start sits that we can maybe run through. We don't got to dive into the why so much, but we can just give some quick answers for some of these guys. Eminem is asking Michael Pittman or Rashad White for the flex this week in PPR. Michael Pittman. Is that where? Are you?
You're going Pittman.
I'm going Pittman. Are you changing that answer? We just talked about White a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, my gut's saying Pittman, but what do the rankings say is the question, right? Yeah,
it's full PPR.
Full PPR, yeah. He's ahead of Rashad White.
We have Jacoby Myers or Cortland Sutton. No scoring system here, but I don't know. I don't know if it necessarily does matter or not because they're both wide receivers, probably both going to see a similar-ish workload. Myers has a great matchup against the Chargers, and Sutton has a great matchup against the Bears.
Yeah, I'm going Sutton. Myers has been great, but the Garoppolo situation is a little scary. Now that might change if Garoppolo is cleared, but if the quarterback is Brian Hoyer or the rookie they have there, then I'd rather go Sutton.
Yeah, I agree. I'd play Myers if Jimmy G plays. Cortland Sutton if not. Carlos is asking. He said he found us by searching fantasy football on YouTube. There you go. Thank you, Carlos. Achane or Alexander Madison this week. Another interesting running back name that we haven't talked about yet today. But
I don't know what format this is. Madison is coming in at a little higher right now, but I think I might change I mentioned that earlier. I was going to move Achane up. There's about a point difference right now in PPR. I think Madison did pretty well last week.
Yep.
After the Akers trade, he did fumble, but it was not ruled a fumble. And there was some discussion from Kevin O'Connell saying that if guys can't, hold on to the ball, then we're going to put guys in that can. Now Akers has his own fumbling history, so I don't know if that's going to be the solution. I wonder about this week, Akers' first week, and how much is he going to impact Madison's workload? Does he just take over the RB2 duties there, which hasn't been a whole lot? And this is such a good matchup against Carolina. They're 30th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back. So I do envision there's a way for Madison to have a very good game. I also think that Achane could have a very good game against Buffalo. So I think it's a lot more fun to start Achane. But I think there's a floor ceiling argument here where it might not pan out. But I would go. I think I'm leaning Achane.
I would also go Achane as well. Does the PPR change your mind on that or not?
No, I actually pulled up PPR as a default.
Okay.
I figured this league was not created in 2002.
What about Achane or DeAndre Hopkins in a full PPR? Are you still sticking with Achane here?
Full PPR, yeah. I'm not.
That Hopkins Titans offense is oof. It's very oof against the Bengals as well.
Yeah, I'm going Achane.
Marvin Mims or Najee Harris? Oh boy. I think you take Najee for the touch floor, but if you need that home run swing, that Giancarlo Stanton's home run swing to the fence, then I would play Marvin Mims.
Najee has a great matchup, and he's likely to see 18 carries against the Texans. They're 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back, so he's got that high floor, and he'll probably, he's got a good chance to score a touchdown.
And then Richardson or Brock Purdy. I think this is an interesting one.
Look, I guess if you think that I have Anthony Richardson at 5.
I agree. I'm playing Richardson.
Purdy at 15. So I would play Richardson. If you're worried about them not running him at the goal line because they're trying to protect him, then you could maybe make the case for Purdy. Purdy has the best matchup at the quarterback position. Cardinals are 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to run quarterbacks. But, I've got Richardson at 5, Purdy at 15. It's pretty clear. I'm going to start Richardson when he's available.
I agree. Richardson for sure. We're just continuing with Achane real quick. Are you starting Eats again over over
Yes,
Achane.
I'm taking ETN over Achane. Yeah,
I just had to make sure.
That's a bridge too far.
Carlos is going to go Achane as well too. He started Musgrave last night, got hit with a concussion, so you need a little bit of upside injected. Throw in Devon Achane. The last question, John, before we hit out, I've been seeing some people talk about Derrick Henry in the chat here. We have Josh is asking from a dynasty perspective, is a first and second too high to give up for Derrick Henry? Personally, I think it is. But a lot of other people in here, Deesh is asking, should we hold or trade Derrick Henry? If so, what should we be looking for? I've seen a couple other people say is now a good time to buy low on him. We can kind of end on a little Derrick Henry conversation if you have any thoughts about what you're doing with him from a rest of season perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think this seems, I'm having deja vu a little bit with the Henry discussion because he got off to a slow start last year and then tore it up. The only change here is that they really are working Spears in a lot. Henry only played 38% of the snaps last week, 71% the week before. Like, nothing in the first two games worries me. He had 113 or 118, 119 total yards against New Orleans, saw 2 catches that they were able to. I mean, he led the league. He led all running backs last year in yards per route run, Derrick Henry.
Right.
So, why are they not throwing him one pass every quarter?
I say that every single week.
Against the Chargers, 25 for 80 and a touchdown with 3 catches for 15. Nothing worries me about that. The Cleveland game's a little weird. It was 11 for 20. They could not get the running game going. He ended up only playing 38% of the snaps. So I think you're looking forward. The Browns are a really good defense. Cincinnati is third in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. He might not have a great game this week, although, if I remember correctly, the Bengals, even though their adjusted fantasy points allowed are concerning for Henry, they've given up 152 yards rushing, 5.1 yards per carry this year. So this could be a game where he actually gets off. Then he's got Indy, Baltimore, who's 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Tampa. Nothing too alarming there. I think the thing is with Henry is if you look at his close of season, Carolina in week 12, Indy in week 13, Miami in week 14, Houston in week 15, Seattle in week 16, Houston in week 17. Like I would not trade him away. I would, if you're looking, I would hold for this and hope you can make a run at the end of the year. But I think even in the short next 3 to 4 weeks, he will have some normal Derrick Henry games. There was nothing wrong with his 18.5 PPR that he scored against the Chargers in week 2. So I don't think that the ceiling is necessarily there because he's not playing as many snaps. So in bad matchups, he's not going to be out there 80% of the time getting 25 touches. He's averaging 17 carries and 1.67 receptions this year, and that's far below his usual 20 touch per week output. Sorry, that was long-winded, but I've been thinking about Derrick Henry.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think he's definitely a good buy low right now. I don't think you need to send a first and second for him in a dynasty format. I do think that in a redraft format, I would love to see what I could try to do if I could move away like a Rashad White or, some of those other lower level like RB2s and try and get off of them to a more established Derrick Henry. So I do agree on that. We did get a super chat at the buzzer though. In pick 2, Garrett Wilson, Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, or DeAndre Hopkins. Tyler, if you're still in here, if you could drop the scoring, if it's half or full PPR, or maybe if it's standard, if you've been playing since 2005. But that would just help us give you the best possible answer for this. But since they're all wide receivers, it may not necessarily matter all too much. But pick 2 between Garrett Wilson, Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, DeAndre Hopkins. Jacoby Myers, I think, is 1 for sure. Oh boy.
This is his pick two to start.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out who the second one should be. And I think I've basically tossed out DeAndre Hopkins. I'm between Jerry Jeudy and Garrett Wilson. And I don't like it. I'd probably go Jerry Jeudy just for the matchup against Chicago. But it's not super inspiring. Help us out here, John. Hopefully you got your rankings up here. So
I've got Garrett Wilson the highest. It's a talent thing. And then the other three are kind of jammed together. I'm worried about the quarterback situation with Vegas. If Garoppolo plays, then I think I would go Garrett and Jacoby. And if it's he's out, then I'd probably go Garrett and Hopkins. But it's ugly. And I see some people complaining that we're not answering all the questions. So do you want to kind of run down our thought process on how we can't get to all of them?
There's too many. I tried to respond a little bit in the chat and stuff too. We only have a short amount of time, so we try to go through as many as we possibly can. And sometimes it's in that that means that I select questions that maybe be a little bit easier to answer and more conducive to a live format. We can definitely get to questions if you drop them into the comments in the replay of this chat, and then in like more of a written format, I kind of can go through some of them a lot easier and dive into those questions pretty deeply. I feel like I answered a lot of good questions.
Why don't we, if you can pull up AS's question and Chef Nabby's question. Complaining is not going to get you your questions answered every week, but just make these two. They're just very upset. So let's not make people upset. We'll try to placate you this week. If you can find AS or Chef El Nabby, he claims he did a super chat, but I don't think he did a super chat.
Yeah, I didn't see one in here. I messaged that in there too. Sorry, I went through the whole entire thing. I didn't see a super chat from him.
I'm scrolling up looking for his question here.
AS is should he trade away Najee, Kamara, Godwin, and Hopkins for ETN, Mostert, and Tank Dell? Half PPR. Those are his wide receivers, and those are his running backs. So he has a pretty good, pretty decent running back core, I would say. Like Tony Pollard obviously is fantastic. DeAndre Swift isn't popping. Najee's been a little underperforming. Kamara's coming back. Wide receivers, he's waiting on Kupp to come back. Not a lot of elite talent at the top, I should say. It seems very flat in terms of the wide receiver talent. But would you trade away Najee, Kamara, Godwin, and Hopkins for ETN, Raheem Mostert, and Tank Dell?
Yeah, I think you're getting two really hot running backs with ETN and Mostert. It'd be interesting to see what happens when Jeff Wilson comes back with his backfield. If he starts to get like 6 to 8 touches per game, that might, and then the running game kind of goes back to normal in terms of its production, then Mostert may not be startable every week. But right now they look really hot. I mean, you're giving up basically Najee's disappointing, Godwin's disappointing, Hopkins disappointing for ETN, who's been very good, Mostert, who's been very good, and Dell, who's been very good. So it is sort of a point chasing situation, but I'm not seeing anything other than Kamara of huge value on that left side with Najee, Kamara, Godwin, Hopkins. That I'm not super optimistic that Najee, Godwin, or Hopkins are going to turn things around.
Yeah, I almost look at this and I'm like, from a redraft perspective, it could almost just be beneficial just to take, like, I was like, could I just take ETN over all of the other side completely? Not even mentioning the fact that he also got, or would also be getting Raheem Mostert and Tank Dell on top of it. Like, I think there is something to be said about just having the best starting lineup possible, and then your bench could be waiver wire guys that you kind of accrued along the way. Like ETN is by far the best talented and best producing player in this whole entire trade. Mostert's probably a close second, or at least after his 40-point game last week, he definitely is. But I think I'm taking ETN, Mostert, and Tank Dell as well. I think that's a pretty good one.
So there's your answer. And I would say that if you don't find our discussion useful, if your question's not answered, then maybe this isn't the stream for you. We don't need to be attacked in the comments. We're here doing the Lord's work, answering start-sit questions for you. Maybe we get to it, maybe we don't.
Or drop a comment in the replay after the fact as well.
Or throw us a buck. Throw us a buck, you'll get an answer. You'll get an answer.
That works too. This is Chef's question. I found his. Someone offered me Hurts, Mark Andrews, and Breece Hall for Anthony Richardson, Saquon Barkley, and Darren Waller. So it goes from Hurts to Richardson, Andrews to Waller, Breece to Barkley. I'm taking Hurts and Mark Andrews. I guess he's going from Richardson to Hurts, Waller to Andrews, Barkley to Breece. I think I'm taking
Mark
Hurts
Andrews and Breece Hall for Richardson, Barkley, and Waller.
It's a tough sell though, because you are losing. Like, is the upgrade from Richardson to Hurts worth the downgrade from Barkley to Breece Hall? So, I mean, Waller to Andrews is fantastic, but I think there's an argument to be said that Richardson and Hurts could be similarly producing moving forward because of Richardson's rushing floor. That maybe it's just better to take Saquon over Breece Hall and then deal with the tight end later with Waller. And Waller's not a bad tight end either. He's just, the Giants have just started out really, really slow. Maybe he gets better. I don't know. I feel like it'd be nicer to see Hurts and Andrews though.
I mean, I think you're with Richardson, Barkley, and Waller, you have 3 starters that you're starting every week. I think with Hurts, Mark Andrews, and Breece Hall, you're not for sure starting Breece Hall every week until he's getting back to his normal usage. So that's the one concern I have. But I think that
Sure.
Andrews is starting a little slow. Hurts is the best player in the trade. And then if Hall gets it going. So I guess it's all your belief on how close Hall can make it with Barkley. I think I don't know if Richardson's right there with Hurts, but it's fairly close.
It's relatively close to where it does feel like the downgrade from Barkley to Breece is more of a consideration,
And then now the people in the chat that didn't complain are upset that people that complained got their question answered. But here we are.
Chef says he does have Taylor, Mostert, Swift, and Stevenson at running back. So maybe he doesn't necessarily need
Barkley.
Right? Then he can take the upgrade at the other 2 positions.
Yeah.
And now you're starting Swift and Stevenson. I'm doing it. I'll take Hurts and Andrews. I think it looks better. Then you can start. JT's going to be coming back here soon. You can fill in at running back with Mostert, Swift, and Stevenson.
And I do think Andrews gets it going with the injuries at receiver for the Ravens. I mean, Beckham's out. Bateman's injured again. So they're going to have to throw to him.
Mm-hmm. Plus, with Saquon's injury, that's an added layer as well.
Good point by Carlos there.
Yeah, he might. I've been seeing that he might play. Well, they played Monday night, right? Yeah. I've been seeing that. I'm like, boy, I don't know. That seems really fast. But if he takes this week off and maybe next week still, might just be better to have Hurts and Andrews. Are you a pancakes or waffles kind of guy?
I like both.
French toast.
I think I prefer. Yeah, French toast is good too. I like waffles. There's a waffle place called Bruxy nearby, and they do waffle sandwiches. And it's like egg sandwiches on waffles or cheeseburgers on waffles. It's just amazing. Fried chicken.
Sheesh.
So, but just by themselves, I think I like both. But I think I would go French toast.
Yeah, French toast is 100% the answer. Like, that's in a tier all by itself. Like, if
these two are vying for number 2.
Yeah, honestly, they're vying for like 3, like, because there is no number 2. It's just French toast. And if you don't have French toast, then I'm gonna go buy bread and I'm gonna make French toast. But that's it. Alrighty. It's all about the syrup. All right. So that's another week in the books. We appreciate all of you guys so much for hanging out with us for the past 90 minutes or so, asking all of your start-sit questions. And I do apologize that we can't get to all of them every single week. But like I said, if you do want to leave a comment, if you're watching on the DLF side or the 4for4 side, you can leave a comment on the replay after the fact. That'll go into the YouTube videos comment section. I answer all the questions on the DLF side, and I will try to unpack your questions as much as I can. The 4for4 side, I think Sal answers those questions, but then we can get some input from John. Maybe I'll bump into the 4for4 as well. But we do answer as many comments as we possibly can here live, And then I basically answer every single question in the comment section on the YouTube side as well.
And I would just add that if you do become a subscriber to 4for4 and join our Discord, I do a chat every Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Pacific, and I answer every question in there. So if you really want your question answered, that's the way to do it.
Plus, you get access to all the rankings and the tools and so much better just to be
sign up to 4for4. We've got ways for you to get a free subscription with our partnership with Sleeper, BetMGM, and Vivid Picks. You can get a free subscription. Join the Discord.
Boom. But yeah, we appreciate all y'all hanging out this week. We will see y'all again next week, Friday, 12 Eastern time for week 5 questions. So have a great weekend, everybody. Hopefully all of your fantasy matchups, all your players go off this week. You win all of your matchups. We'll see you guys next week. See you.